conditionals, handlers, and loops. And what we're going to see is that these control statements within Ansible gives us the ability to loop through things so we don't have to have our playbooks be quite so long, so that we have a different statement for each one of the things that we want our Ansible server to do. Our conditionals, handlers, and loops work together to make it so that we can get all those that our playbooks to work much more efficiently for us. So when statement is used. This is a classic use of a when statement. So here we've got a task on our host's web servers, and we want to update them, or we want to install some new package on them. But our problem is that we've got web servers. Some of them are Red Hat web servers, CentOS, RHEL, whatever, and others are Ubuntu's or other Debians. And so, we've got this obvious problem. So if they're Red Hat web servers, then we want to use Yum. But if they're not Red Hat web servers, if they're Debian web servers, then we want to use APT. So the when statement allows us to read through that gather facts when Ansible underscore OS underscore family equals Red Hat. That tells us that we've got rel, cent, whatever, Red Hat family distribution. And in this case, we want to use Yum to do our install. If, on the other hand, in the gather facts, we see that Ansible OS family equals Debian, here we want to use APT. So this is a really classic use of a when statement that's easy to work with and very efficient for getting new stuff installed. Register variables. We talked about these in the last video when we talked about variables. And here's one where we can say when something exists, we want to do something. And of course, the stat module allows us to do that. Stat tells us whether a file exists or not, basically. And so in this first task, we're going to say check the Apache vhost configuration file. Vhost configuration file says how many different websites you can host on one Apache server. And places like GoDaddy and those kind of large scale but small web server hosting companies probably use this like crazy, lots of vhosts. And so in this case, we're saying that we're statting the file etc httpd conf.d app.conf. We want to see if that file exists. If it exists, then we're probably all set with our vhost file. And if that file does exist, if stat comes back as true, then we want to register that file as the variable appconf. So that the content of that file is now in the variable appconf. Our next task is we want to say, well, when this file exists, or doesn't exist, I'm sorry, when it not exists, then what we want to do is we want to copy our version of app.conf into the server. And so our next task is to copy appconf. Now, the one thing I would have you notice, is that we've got a difference. Our variable is called appconf. The file name that we're working with is app.conf. Okay, so if that file exists already, then we're going to do something. If it doesn't exist, then we're going to copy our version of the file over. And that's what we're doing here. And then our last little task is we're restarting Apache, because now we've got an app.conf file. So that's what we want to do to get it to reread all its configuration files. To get Apache to reread all its configuration files, you have to restart it. And that's what this is doing. um, running operations on a change. So, a lot of times we're going to run our playbooks and nothing's going to happen. It's already going to be up to date. It's already going to have the right content. It's going to have our app file. It's already done. If that's the case, we don't want to do anything. If it's already properly configured, we don't want to restart it. We don't want to copy stuff. We don't want to do anything. We just want it to check to make sure that it's configured properly. And if it's not, then we want to restart it. And that's what this little playbook does. So we're checking once again to make sure that app.conf file exists. We're registering that file as the variable appconf, and then let's see the next task is we're copying it when not appconf.stat exists. Then we want to restart Apache because we've reinstalled that app.conf file. And then our handlers at the end here, they say when there's been a change, restart Apache. But if there hasn't been a change, your handler is going to say, we're not going to run this task because there's no reason to. So handlers are really nice if you're going to do things like use Ansible to check the status of files that you're serving, or using Ansible to update files or anything like that. Handlers make it so that you don't have to restart or you don't have to do something unless you need to do it. And that's what handlers do. And then looping, this is another classic one. So our problem on the left is that we're going to have this really long task book, playbook, that has all these different tasks for all the different stuff that we want to install. That's a pain. Wouldn't it be better if we could just set up a loop so that it would go through that loop and do as many things as need to be done? And that's the version on the right hand side here, where we've got our name equals item and state present groups wheel, and then we have this with item statement down at the bottom. In this case, we're adding users to a machine, and our with item statement is a group of users. Well, another classic example of when you would use a with item statement is when you want to install lots of different pieces of software. And instead of having, go through yum update, yum update, yum update, yum update, and a whole bunch of different tasks in a playbook, here we can use a with items command, and we just have it run through once and do all the installs that we need. And let's see, now we're doing file iterations. Here's another thing. If you want to move a bunch of files around, the with items statement works really well for that, especially if they're all the same. So if our destination is /var/www/html/, so we're putting them into a subdirectory under our var www.html, and we want to put all of these files in here. Now, this would probably be combined with a handler where we would say, restart Apache, because we wanted to reread all these files if we're copying them in. But, as long as things are pretty much the same, the with file, in this case, with items we saw just before, works really well and shortens up your playbook immeasurably, just because you don't have to have so much stuff in there, so many separate tasks just to move files around. So we can do that very quickly. Now, you guys have been moving web files around. This would be a way, you're probably moving a whole subdirectory at once, in which case it's a little easier. But if you wanted to combine that with a few other things, configuration files that you wanted to do at the same time, that's where this with file command would work really well. And file glob, that's another way to say, let's use some Let's use some statements to make it so that we can grab a whole bunch of files at the same time that match the same format. So here we've got star.php and regular expressions. That's what I was thinking of. So we can use regular expressions with file glob to gather a whole bunch of files at the same time rather than having all the tasks that we see on the left-hand side.